One Piece is not one piece. It is in fact many pieces, fragmented, scattered across a wide array of mediums, which rather sadly means that depending on how you choose to experience One Piece, then you may be missing out on some incredibly important information. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and I've just realized that whilst I'm your source for everything One Piece, I don't have my source for everything One Piece. So that makes me feel quite empty inside. But today we are here to enhance, enlighten, and even lengthen our experience of One Piece through the wonderful medium of cover stories. What is a cover story and why do I care, you ask? And that's a reasonable question, but just tone down the attitude. You should care because cover stories aren't just fun and games, although they are certainly full of both fun and games in equal measure. But for example, if you're an anime-only watcher, do you remember that time that Jinbei found a poneglyph? Or perhaps that time that Shanks went to a wedding? Or maybe, just maybe, that one time where it was ever so casually revealed that Bon Clay is in fact alive? Probably not, because they were never animated and possibly never will be. Which is a shame because they form a very integral aspect of One Piece, just like you form an integral aspect of subscribing to the Grand Line Review, and the doing of which will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. And I'll tell you what, in exchange for subscribing, I will now tell you a story. Long ago in a place that didn't exist, an angel fell from the sky. The angel landed in a hole, but he was saved by a husky old man. The two then exchanged dreams. The old man wanted to build a hot springs resort, but the angel wanted to be the boss of the entire Blue Sea. That angel's name was Sky Boss Geratsu. And the fact that he was Geratsu made things immediately problematic, because Geratsu was a very special angel, one who did not understand the basic laws of life, such as standing on the ground, eating with your mouth, and even breathing with your breathing holes. That's right, Geratsu forgot how to breathe. After a cacophony of accidents, Sky Boss Geratsu disturbed the legendary forest boss as well as the dirt boss, aka a mandrill and a giant mole. But Geratsu punched them and became the boss's boss. Together with the dirt boss, Geratsu tunneled undersea, emerging on the desert island of Alabasta, where it is shockingly revealed that the husky old man was in fact Koza's uncle, if you remember who Koza is. And if you don't, well, he was important that one time. Upon returning home, they discovered that the forest boss had constructed an entire resort, and thus the royalty of Alabasta were invited to enjoy the newly opened hot springs. Nefertari Vivi, Kung Fu Dugong, Igaram, and Female Igaram, all of the big names were there. And it would be at this point that the Great Geratsu took a moment of introspection, as he discovered that he had, entirely accidentally mind you, become the co-owner of a hot springs resort. The boss, if you will, and thus concludes the tale of how the Great Geratsu became a boss of the Blue Sea. What an inspiring story. So that was an example of a cover story, a special narrative told one image at a time, in this case over 32 installments, all of which played out entirely on chapter covers. Now, a cover is essentially the first page of any given manga chapter. In Japan, these are known as tobira or door pages, and they're designed to be opened by readers and have them step into the world of whatever the series it is. And this practice exists because manga is typically serialized in these big chunk magazines alongside like 20 other titles. So we need these doors as more of a technical mechanism to separate each series. And in fact, each author has their own unique method of constructing doors. However, I think it would be fair to say that Eiichiro Oda has by far the most unique of methods. Because very early on in the lifespan of One Piece, Oda saw this free real estate, and like a greedy property developer, he decided to pack it with stuff. Except instead of a 22-story apartment block, Oda removed both the apartment and the block, leaving us with just pure story. And that's how One Piece cover stories like the one you just heard were born. And they are legitimately one of my favorite things about this series as a whole. Because while Luffy and the Luffy crew are doing all sorts of wacky pirate stuff, we get to see what other characters are doing at the exact same time. And in most series you would just say, well, yeah, who cares what all the blubber-dubbers are doing? But because every One Piece character tends to feel like an actual living being rather than a nicely drawn set piece, we do tend to care about even the tertiary characters quite a bit. And they give us all sorts of fun connective moments, like the Geratsu story. There is a panel showing Geratsu and Karoo in the same place, place. Two characters who may as well have been in entirely different series because their arcs are so far removed from one another. And another great example of this would be our most recent cover story featuring Capone Gang Beige. After escaping from obese mother's Cake Island, his crew ended up landing on Dressrosa and finding Chiffon's sister, Charlotte Lola. So this one cover story brings together elements from Whole Cake Island, Dressrosa, and Thriller Bark. And I just cannot explain how satisfying it is to see all of these different One Piece world elements interacting. But cover stories are also a fantastic opportunity to expand on characters and potentially even improve on what may have been very unpopular existences. And as an example of this, let's now turn to one of my personal favorite tales. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Mostly the second one though, because after being bazookaed by a certain rubber boy, our now protagonist Wapol has ended up on a strange miscellaneous island. And in order to survive, Wapol had to source nourishment for himself. "I eat a tree," said Wapol, then turning into a tree, but he was still hungry. "I eat a lamp," exclaimed Wapol, turning into a light source that really frustrated this owl in particular. "I eat a bench," roared Wapol, terrifying the townsfolk, before being promptly arrested for being a bit of a public nuisance. Upon escaping the authorities, Wapol came to the startling realization that he was no longer a king. So he entered a bout of depression, deciding to live under a bridge and sustaining himself purely on industrial garbage. But then, in his darkest moment, a miracle. As an unintended byproduct of consuming industrial waste, the Baku Baku factory within Wapol produced a series of toys. These toys attracted children from all over the town, and so Wapol opened a small toy store to make ends meet in order to continue his rather pitiful existence. But that wasn't even the true miracle. Upon taking one of Wapol's nicely shaped excretions home, a local scientist discovered that the toys had been constructed from an entirely new metal alloy. This new element was dubbed Wapo Metal, and its special properties made Wapol a millionaire overnight, leading him to build a bigger toy store, then his own corporation, and finally providing him with enough money to literally buy his own country, now known as the Black Drum Kingdom. Oh, and also he married Miss Universe, which is wow. So there you go, a proper riches to rags to riches again story. Which just goes to show that screwing up hard enough is essentially the equivalent of success, I guess. Is that the moral of the story? But this cover story is the sole reason why I love Wapol. During Drum Island, I really could not have cared less about him. He just had the wrong balance of features to be our primary antagonist. He was a bit too funny and not anywhere near enough powerful to be threatening, so I found it really hard to buy into any kind of, drama surrounding him. However, cover stories are the perfect vehicle for someone like Wapol because you can take all of the serious drama away and just focus on what he does best, which is comedy. And I would say the same thing for Buggy as well. Orangetown didn't give me the best impression of Mr. Clown-san. However, reading his adventure to get his body back, meeting Gaimon, Alvida, and just all of that stuff across a cover story converted me into a solid Buggy fan. Which brings us to an interesting idea because the Buggy cover story was actually animated. So was the Wapol story actually. They made a quick little 5-minute segment of it during the Reverie arc. But the vast majority of these tales are never put to screen. And why is that? Well, a common answer to this would be ratings. Because allegedly when the 2-episode Buggy adventure was aired, as well as the 2-episode Kobe and Hilmepo story, they were met with terrible responses from fans. Although I honestly have yet to find any data that solidly backs that idea up. From a theoretical standpoint, I suppose in the early days I could understand that though. It might feel a bit fillerish to spend 2 episodes focusing on someone like, say, Kobe, when we could be spending time with our actual main characters, the people that we like. Or at least like more than Kobe. However, in this day and age, I don't think that would be such a big deal. One Piece has gone so far beyond the simple adventures of our simple-minded rubber Chad lad. And the anime staff are very keenly aware that cover stories do exist as material to be used because every now and then you see this sneaky little reference. Like this here newspaper that Crocus is holding. On one page you can see an article about Moda and the milk that she ended up providing to the Marines, which was only possible because Ace delivered a letter to Vice Admiral Kommel during his cover story. And Moda herself, by the way, went on to make an actual appearance in the series because it was her village that was attacked by the kooky, weird peach beard. And on the other side, we see something that I'm not quite sure is newsworthy, which were Iceberg's new secretary auditions. Because once Califer turned out to be an evil death machine, well, we needed someone new to conduct day-to-day administration. And in case you're curious, and I know that you are, the candidate who ended up getting the job was this genius 10-year-old girl. And we know that from a completely separate cover story, actually, because these features aren't just a one and done. The cover stories have have their own continuity, their own characters, and even their own entire arcs. They're really great because they're pretty much the one time you can experience One Piece when the world isn't completely centered around Luffy. Everyone else gets the chance to become the protagonist of their own goofy, fun pirate adventure. And on that note, I think it's time for another story. So story mode, activate! Once upon a time in an underwater paradise, Caribou was ruining everything. Having been left on Fishman Island, he was being his stupid, swampy self and was promptly ejected by Jinbei, Knight of the Sea, banished to the marine branch of G5, where Caribou was immediately scheduled to be executed by one of three surprisingly brutal methods. I mean, holy crap, this is One Piece. We should not be talking about burning people at the stake. However, just as Caribou's fate was decided, it was undecided because Caribou appeared to rescue his brother. Caribou being the guy with the lizard on his head, which looks like hair in the shape of a lizard, but is actually a lizard in the shape of hair. Feeling the true bonds of brotherhood, Caribou promptly abandoned Caribou and escaped on his own, only to be immediately caught in a very karmic shipwreck and washing up on a most fatesome island. Here, Caribou would be nursed back to health by a lovely old lady who even provided him with a meat pie lunchbox. However, Caribou would soon come to discover that this island was home to a deceased revolutionary hero named Gabiru, who just so happened to look like Caribou in every way. And not only this, but Gabiru was the kind old lady's grandson, and she had now mistaken Caribou for her deceased family member. At this very moment, the revolutionary forces were attacked by the beast pirates led by Scotch, and with no other choice, Caribou was forced to fight and defeat Scotch, thus taking on the mantle of the revolutionary hero and being celebrated as the second coming of Gabiru. But then, dinosaurs. Toby Roper member and all-around sneaky boy Diaz Drake appeared, easily defeating and capturing Caribou. And whilst he was being unceremoniously and embarrassingly dragged to prison, the kind old lady provided Caribou with a farewell meat pie, before it was shockingly revealed that she had known all along that Caribou was not her grandson. Then Caribou went to prison on Wano, and everyone lived happily ever after, except for Caribou, who was in prison. And that is the story of how Caribou ended up on Wano. Story mode, deactivate. And I'm just curious, did that ever confuse any anime-only watchers? Because in the anime continuity, the last time you would have seen Caribou would have been on Fishman Island, and then somehow, like the bazillion episodes later, he ended up in the Udon prison. And look, it's far from the biggest deal in the world, but this is still one of the major reasons why I recommend that people read the manga, because it just contains so much more. And given how insanely addicted we are to this One Piece drug, more will always be better than not more. And to capitalize on your addiction, here is another video. It's also about One Piece. Let's just hook it to your veins, because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.